This marks the 999th time I've provoked my childhood friend, Madelyn. But I never could have imagined that this specific prank would be the one to change everything. It was the catalyst that forced me to flee this city for 2 years, a journey that only ended when I took a tumble down a flight of stairs. As I lay there, a flood of memories, ones that didn't belong to me, surged into my mind. That was the moment I realized I was living inside a novel. Even worse, I was the villainous second lead, the arrogant brat destined to clash with the protagonist until my family was bankrupt and I was driven to jump from a rooftop. And Madelyn? She was the female lead. In the original plot, she was the cold-blooded architect who would personally drive my family into a dead end. Terrified, I begged my father to cancel our engagement that very night. I cooked up a melodramatic excuse about leaving for true love and disappeared for 2 years. I thought I had cheated fate. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. 2 years later, she found me. She pinned me down, gripping my chin with a force that made my bones ache, and poured a spiced glass of wine down my throat. Her voice was so tender it made my skin crawl. "Silas, I've finally caught you." The nightmare truly began the day I fell down those stairs. "Silas, I heard you've been getting quite cozy with that freshman girl from a neighboring class lately." Madelyn's voice drifted from behind me. There was a sharp tang of jealousy in her tone, though I doubt even she noticed it back then. At the time, I was lazily descending the staircase. Hearing her, I paused, leaning back against the handrail and arching an eyebrow at her. "Oh, you heard about that, did you?" I teased. "What? Are you secretly in love with me? Why else would you be so obsessed with my private life?" Her porcelain skin instantly flushed a deep crimson. Like a cat that had its tail stepped on, she bristled immediately. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? How could I ever like a bully like you? A toad like you dreaming of swan meat? Get real." I let out a deliberate, mocking laugh. Without an ounce of shame, I leaned in close, lowering my voice until only she could hear. "While I might not get a taste of the swan," I whispered, "but I think I'm about to get a taste of that freshman girl." Her eyes widened in shock. The familiar rush of satisfaction from a successful prank surged through me, and I couldn't resist pouring more oil on the fire. "She told me she'd give me her answer tomorrow," I added with a smirk. "Looks like I'm finally going to win the beauty's heart." Predictably, Madelyn was fuming. She shoved her hand against my chest, her voice trembling. "Don't you know she has a boyfriend? You're a homewrecker, Silas. A scumbag who destroys other people's happiness." I went along with her push, staggering back 2 steps with exaggerated drama. Feigning a loss of balance, I continued to provoke her. "Of course I know. I live by 3 principles. No initiative, no refusal, and no responsibility. If a snack is served right to my face, why shouldn't I eat?" "Silas, you're a monster." Madelyn's eyes grew red with fury. She lunged forward and gave me a massive shove. This time, she used every bit of her strength. I was already standing precariously at the edge of the staircase, playing my little game of wobbling. But with that force, my balance completely vanished. "Damn it," was all I could gasp before my body tipped backward uncontrollably. The back of my skull slammed directly onto the sharp corner of a stone step. The world spun violently, my vision faded to black, and I lost all sensation. Before my consciousness slipped away entirely, the last thing I heard was Madelyn's piercing, grief-stricken scream. A cinematic slumber. Then, I fell into an endless dream. Inside that dream, time reversed, and every familiar memory replayed like scenes from a movie. Madelyn and I had truly grown up together, practically sharing the same clothes since we were toddlers. The only thing was, I had been a terror to her since the beginning. In my memories, I saw myself snatching her baby bottle and chugging the milk in a few gulps before casually patting her chubby cheeks. She would wail on the spot and run to tell my parents, which inevitably led to me getting a thrashing. Refusing to back down, I'd wait until the adults weren't looking and sneak back to make her cry all over again. When we hit elementary school, I stole her workbooks to copy her answers. Once finished, I'd tear the pages out and toss them in the trash, leaving her to be punished by the teacher in front of the whole class. She sat in the row ahead of me, and every day I would yank her ponytail or tie her braids to the back of the chair, just to see her wince in pain when she tried to stand up. Of course, she wasn't helpless. She'd grab a textbook and chase me across the room. Thanks to my long legs, I usually managed to escape, ducking into the boys' restroom while mocking her for being a coward. But there were a few times she got so angry her eyes turned blood red. She charged straight into the restroom, grabbed me by the arm, and dragged me out for a proper beating. By middle school, things changed slightly. I once helped her chase off a group of thugs who cornered her on the way home, leaving me black and blue. She laughed at me for a long time while applying my bandages. Since then, it seemed I had stopped using my hands and moved on to verbal teasing. I simply loved seeing her get so riled up by my words that she would literally jump with rage. When she realized she couldn't outsmart me, she would resort to grabbing my arm and sinking her teeth into it, leaving a deep, painful set of bite marks. I'd howl in pain and swat at her head. "Are you a dog or something? Let go." By high school, my pranks reached a new level of idiocy. She once asked me to discreetly bring her some feminine products. Instead, I made sure the entire class found out. I was the butt of every joke for the rest of the semester. These are my memories, vivid, clear, and as fresh as if they had happened yesterday. But the dream didn't end there. Suddenly, a tidal wave of foreign memories, scenes that didn't belong to me, crashed into my mind. It was a world within a novel, and these memories felt even more real than reality itself. Madelyn was the female lead of this story, beautiful, virtuous, and resilient. The freshman girl, Tessa, the one who was supposed to confess to me today, her boyfriend, Quincy, was the destined male lead. And me? I was the antagonist, Silas. I was the one who bullied the female lead since childhood and fought the male lead for a woman later in life. In the end, they would join forces to strip my family of everything until I jumped from a rooftop in utter despair. No, I bolted upright on the hospital bed, gasping for air, drenched in a cold sweat. The pungent scent of disinfectant and the stark white sheets told me I was alive. I had just taken a fall and seen a glimpse of my own goddamn execution. "Silas, you're awake." A soft, worried voice called out from beside me. My neck felt stiff as I turned to see Madelyn sitting by the bed. Her eyes were bloodshot. She had clearly been crying, and her face was etched with guilt. I had looked at this face for 20 years, but now, she wasn't just my childhood friend anymore. She was the catalyst for my family's ruin. She was the reason I'd be forced onto that rooftop. A chill raced from the soles of my feet to the top of my skull. My survival instinct immediately overrode everything else. One thought consumed me. Run. Now, I have to get away. I ignored Madelyn's concern. I brushed off the doctor's advice to stay for observation. I demanded to be discharged immediately. Those memories of bankruptcy and ruin felt like a blade pressed against my throat. Every second spent near her felt like a step closer to the edge. I remember the plot clearly. Tessa was supposed to confess to me in the school's small grove this afternoon. I had to go, not to accept her, but to douse this spark before it turned into an inferno. When I arrived at the grove, Tessa was already there, waiting. She wore a pristine white dress, clutching a pink envelope in her hands. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes sparkled the moment she saw me. "Silas, Tessa." I didn't wait for her to start. I cut her off immediately. My face held a level of gravity I had never shown in my entire life. "I know you're a wonderful girl, but I can't accept your feelings. Your boyfriend, Quincy, he loves you deeply. Whatever is happening between you two is likely just a small misunderstanding. I shouldn't be an obstacle between you. I'm just a passerby in your life. He's the one meant to stand by you forever. Go back and talk to him." These hollow yet sincere platitudes left Tessa utterly stunned. She stared at me, frozen. I didn't give her a second to process. I turned and walked away, unwilling to stay even a heartbeat longer. As I turned, I caught a glimpse of someone standing behind a large tree not far away. It was Quincy, the story's original protagonist. His fists were clenched, and his expression was murderous, as if he were ready to charge and beat me at any moment. But as he heard my words and saw the situation unfold, the rage on his face froze, replaced by shock and confusion. Finally, the look he gave me held a hint of admiration. It was no longer the gaze of an arch-nemesis, but rather that of a man looking at a brother who gets it. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Done. If the protagonist didn't view me as an enemy, my chances of survival just skyrocketed. This was the first step in rewriting my fate. From that day on, I initiated my plan to stay far away from Madelyn. When she texted, I didn't reply. When she called, I hung up. At school, the moment I spotted her silhouette from afar, I turned and bolted. I'd rather take a massive deeder back to the dorms than cross paths with her. Madelyn quickly noticed my 360-degree personality shift. At first, she sent messages asking if I was still mad about the fall. I acted as if I hadn't seen them. Then, she began cornering me, outside the classroom, in the cafeteria, on the path to the dorms. "Silas, what on earth are you running from?" she demanded, gripping my arm tightly. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her voice carried a panic she didn't even seem to recognize. I shook her hand off, my heart as cold as stone. I couldn't afford to be soft. Softness led to the abyss. "Nothing. I'm just bored," I said, looking at her coldly. "Bored? We grew up together, and now you're telling me you're bored of me?" Her voice trembled with disbelief. Her relentless pursuit only fueled my growing fear. I was terrified that the cursed momentum of the plot would drag me back onto the old path. It seemed I had to use strong medicine. In another secluded corner of the campus, she blocked my path yet again. "Silas, you owe me an explanation." She stared at me, her eyes filled with raw hurt. But looking at her, all I could picture was the image of my own body plummeting from a high-rise building. Driven by a desperate survival instinct, I spat out the cruelest words possible. "Madelyn," I said, each word landing like a shard of jagged ice. "From today on, let's stop contacting each other. Let's just pretend we never met." The words were a dagger to her heart. I didn't dare look at her again. I turned and walked away, my pace so fast I was practically running. Because I didn't look back, I didn't see Madelyn behind me, standing perfectly still. As she watched my silhouette fade into the distance, the sorrow and confusion in her eyes slowly evaporated. In their place grew a terrifying, dark obsession. She slowly lowered her head, the corners of her mouth curling into an eerie, twisted smile. She spoke in a voice so low only she could hear. "Silas, you belong to me. You aren't escaping." I realized that simply hiding wasn't enough. I had to sever the connection completely and quickly. I holed up in my dorm and called my father. "Dad, I want to call off the engagement." The other end of the line went silent for over 10 seconds. Then came my father's roar. "Silas, you absolute brat. What did you just say?" "I'm perfectly sober, Dad." I took a deep breath. The marriage alliance with the Sterling family must be canceled. Immediately. "Give me one good reason." "I love someone else," I said, using the excuse I had prepared. "She's a freshman in the class next door. We've promised to be together. I'm leaving the city for her. If you don't agree, you could just act like you don't have a son anymore." The reason was shocking enough, and it showed my resolve. My father was breathing heavily with rage. I could easily imagine his face turning a furious shade of purple. I didn't give him a chance to scold me. I kept going. "Dad, we're the ones in the wrong this time. The compensation for the Sterlings must be substantial. We have to make sure they are satisfied. Also, promise me one more thing. In the future, if the Sterlings face any trouble, as long as we can help, we must help them." These words seemed to catch him completely off guard. Perhaps he didn't expect that his rebellious brat of a son would actually be thinking this far ahead. The fury on the other end of the line slowly simmered down, replaced by a sense of weary helplessness. "You've truly grown some wings, haven't you? Fine. Go. Go to River City. There's no one you know there, and it'll save your mother and me the headache of looking at you." No sooner had I hung up than my phone chimed with a notification. A bank transfer alert flashed on the screen, followed by a string of zeros long enough to make my head spin. Without a second's hesitation, I booked the earliest high-speed rail ticket to River City. That night, I fled the city. As I sat on the train, streaking through the dark, watching the landscape blur past the window, I let out a long, shaky breath. The very wind in River City felt like it smelled of freedom. I had finally escaped that death trap of script. In the 2 years that followed, I lived the salted fish lifestyle I had always dreamed of. I rented a penthouse overlooking the river and slept until the sun hit my face. In the afternoons, I'd take my sports car to the most exclusive clubs, and by night, I drowned myself in the wine and opulence of the high-end bars. The money and the liquor numbed my nerves, making me almost forget the nightmare of the future I had dodged. I truly believed my life had veered off the doomed tracks and onto a wide, sunlit highway. But I had no idea that while I was living it up, the Sterling household had descended into chaos. I wouldn't learn until much later just how terrifying Madelyn had become during those 2 years. The news of the canceled engagement hit her like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. When she heard I had called it off for a freshman girl and hadn't hesitated to run away from home, she locked herself in her room for 3 days and 3 nights. She didn't eat. She didn't drink. She just sat on the floor in a daze. Clutched in her hand was a photo of us from our childhood. In the picture, I was smearing ice cream on her face. She was pouting with puffed-out cheeks, and I was laughing without a care in the world. At first, she just cried, her tears splashing onto the glossy paper. But eventually, the tears ran dry. The sorrow and agony in her eyes slowly calcified into a terrifying ashen gray. Love and madness intertwined in her heart, eventually brewing into a poisonous vintage called possession. She stared at my face in the photo, the corners of her mouth curling into an eerie arc as she whispered, "Silas, you can only be mine. You think you can hide? Once I catch you and bring you back, everything will be perfect again." After graduation, she took over her family's business. Her methods were ruthless, turning her into the ice queen of the corporate world, feared by all. She rejected every marriage proposal, and her private life remained disturbingly, impeccably clean. No one knew that this powerhouse of a woman, so formidable in the eyes of the world, locked herself in her room every night to stare at that single photograph over and over again. The longing in her eyes had long ago curdled into an obsession etched into her very bones. The wheels of fate always turn at the most unexpected moments. That day, she was inspecting a shopping mall owned by her family, dressed in a sharp black business suit, radiating an aura of absolute authority. Suddenly, a familiar figure caught her eye. It was Tessa, the freshman girl I had used as a shield. Madelyn's footsteps came to a dead halt. Her gaze locked onto Tessa like a hawk. Her instinct was to rush forward and seize the woman, to demand the whereabouts of the lover who had abandoned her and fled. But in the end, she restrained herself. She dispatched her people to investigate, and very quickly, a truth came to light that made her vision turn dark with fury. Tessa and I had never run away for love. In fact, we hadn't even been in contact. Tessa had long since reconciled with her boyfriend, Quincy. The two were inseparable and preparing to marry after graduation. It meant that everything I had said was a lie. My grand excuse of eloping wasn't for another woman. It was simply to escape her. This realization cut deeper than any betrayal. "So, it wasn't that you fell for someone else, you just wanted to get away from me." Madelyn stood rooted to the spot. The anger in her eyes gradually dissipated, replaced by fixation that bordered on madness. She looked toward the horizon, as if she could pierce through the thousands of miles to see me living my debauched life in River City. The corners of her mouth curled into a smile that would make anyone's skin crawl. "Silas, you aren't getting away." I was completely oblivious. A massive trap, meticulously prepared, was quietly being lowered around me. At that moment, I was sitting in the most luxurious bar in River City, a girl on each arm, soaking in the blaring music. "Brother Silas, you really do live the most extravagant life," a friend beside me said, raising a glass. I shook my glass of whiskey with a smug grin. Of course, when life is good, you have to enjoy it to the fullest. Escaping Madelyn, escaping that deadly script, these past 2 years have been pure bliss. Just then, a commotion broke out at the entrance of the bar. A woman walked in, wearing a fiery red microdress. Her physique was so stunning it was enough to give anyone a nosebleed. Her hair fell in large, wavy curls, and her lips were as red as embers, both wild and seductive. The moment she appeared, every eye in the bar was drawn to her. Even the music seemed to stutter for a second. The friend beside me let out a long whistle. "Good God, look at that absolute masterpiece. Brother Silas, that's definitely your type. A literal goddess on earth." I had been knocking around River City for 2 years, and even for me, beauty of this caliber was rare. I expected her to head for the dance floor or be swarmed by some wealthy heirs offering her drinks. Instead, she cut through the crowd and walked straight toward me. The envious and admiring looks from everyone around us gave my ego a massive boost. She stopped right at my table and looked down at me, her eyes dancing with a hint of mischief. "Is this seat taken?" Her voice was husky and seductive. "For you, there's always an empty seat." I patted the spot beside me, grinning ear to ear. She sat down without hesitation. I poured her a drink, thinking to myself that this was going to be another easy hunt. "A beauty like you, out all alone?" She didn't answer. She raised her glass and leaned in close to my ear. Her warm breath brushed against my skin, sending a prickle of heat through me. "Will you have a drink with me?" My heart skipped a beat. I immediately raised my glass to hers. "It will be my pleasure." I tilted my head back and drained the glass in one go, trying to look as smooth as possible. She watched me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile curling her lips, and finished her own drink. I thought this was just the beginning of a conquest. I had no idea I was the prey that had been stalked for a very long time. After a few more rounds, She nudged me. One more, handsome. Without a second thought, I raised the glass and downed it. But the moment the liquid hit my stomach, I knew something was wrong. A violent wave of dizziness crashed over my head, hitting me faster and harder than any alcohol ever had. The lights before my eyes began to swirl and fracture. The laughter of my friends grew distant, echoing as if from the end of a long tunnel. I shook my head, desperate to snap out of it, but my body felt as heavy as lead. My eyelids were betraying me, sinking shut against my will. I struggled to focus on the face of the bombshell in front of me, wanted to ask her what she had put in my drink. Just before my consciousness faded into total darkness, I saw her face shifting beneath the flickering strobe lights. That heavy, sophisticated makeup seemed to peel away in my mind. That seductive, stranger's face slowly, perfectly, morphed into the face I had spent 2 years running from my deepest nightmares. Madelyn. The smile on her face was no longer sultry or playful. It was a look of sick, twisted satisfaction. Through the haze, I saw her lean down, whispering into my ear in a voice I would never forget as long as I lived, a voice as soft as a dream. Silas, I caught you. The next thing I felt was something soft against the back of my head and the scent of expensive perfume filling my lungs. I struggled to open my eyes. There was no hangover headache, only a terrifying sense of total exhaustion. What met my eyes was a ceiling I had never seen before. The magnificent crystal chandelier cast a soft, ethereal glow over the room. I jolted awake, only to find myself lying on an impossibly large bed. The bedroom was the height of luxury, yet every corner exuded an unsettling, eerie atmosphere. There were no windows. 3 of the walls were a polished, mirror-like black, clearly reflecting my pale, terror-stricken face. I scrambled off the bed, my hands trembling as I touched the walls. They were ice-cold glass. I pressed my face against the surface, desperate to see what lay beyond, but saw nothing but my own reflection. It was one-way glass. A realization struck me like a bolt of lightning, sending a chill through my entire body. I am a prisoner. And as for my captor, I didn't even have to guess. At that exact moment, a beam of light cut through the darkness behind the glass wall. Under the glow, a silhouette I knew better than any other slowly emerged. Madelyn. She was wearing a silk nightgown, a glass of red wine in her hand. Her face wore a look of rapturous, satisfied adoration. She gazed at me as if she were admiring a long-lost treasure finally recovered. She scrutinized every inch of me, from my horrified expression to my clenched fists. My confusion, my shock, and my rage were all, to her, a magnificent spectacle. Madelyn, you're insane. Let me out. I lunged forward, pounding my fist against the glass. It made only a dull, heavy thud. She simply smiled, leisurely swirling her wine, as if watching a fascinating silent film. It hit me then, this room was soundproof. My struggles and screams were nothing more than a silent pantomime for her entertainment. I had to find a way out. I scanned the room, but aside from the bed and a table, it was empty. On the table sat a spread of exquisite, steaming dishes. An idea formed in my mind. I deliberately walked to the farthest corner of the room and sat down, turning my back to her. I wouldn't touch her food. A hunger strike, it was the only silent rebellion I had left. I don't know how much time passed, but waves of hunger began to gnaw at me. Still, I endured, motionless. Finally, the door opened. Madelyn walked in, now dressed in a sharp business suit. Behind her stood 2 expressionless maids. She walked over to me, looking at my stubborn back. There was no anger on her face. Instead, she wore a look of heartbreaking pity that made the hair on my neck stand up. You have to eat, Silas. You'll ruin your health if you stay hungry, she said, her voice so tender it was sickening. If you won't eat on your own, then I'll just have to feed you myself. Before I could even react, the 2 maids had pinned my arms. Each taking a side, they hoisted me up like a helpless chick and forced me into a chair. I struggled with everything I had, but their strength was terrifying. I couldn't move an inch. Madelyn picked up a bowl of porridge, scooped up a spoonful, and brought it to my lips. Open up. I wrenched my head to the side, my lips pressed into a stubborn line. She didn't get angry, but her eyes darkened. Using her free hand, she gripped my jaw. The pressure so intense, I felt as though my bones might snap. I was forced to open my mouth, but I refused to give in. I let the porridge enter, only to let it spill out from the corners of my mouth, staining my clothes and her hand. That wasn't very nice, Madelyn whispered, setting the bowl down. I thought she was giving up and felt a flicker of triumph. But a second later, she leaned in. Her hand never let go of my jaw, while the other moved to grip the back of my neck. Her face was so close I could see the slight tremor in her eyelashes. My mind went blank. The warmth of her breath, mingled with the aroma of the porridge, hit me. With a force that brooked no resistance, she kissed me. It was warm, wet, tasting of porridge, and thick with the sensation of absolute control. It overwhelmed all my senses. The shock made my entire body go rigid. I wasn't just tasting food, I was tasting total subjugation. Her breath brushed against my ear, her voice as soft as a curse. Good boy. See? That's how you listen. That kiss, that bowl of porridge, it completely demolished my psychological defenses. I realized that any resistance in front of this woman, who had fully embraced her dark side, would only be met with even more stifling, overwhelming intimacy. I stopped struggling and slumped into the chair, my body going limp. Satisfied, she picked the bowl back up and fed me, spoonful by spoonful. Like a soulless puppet, I mechanically opened my mouth and swallowed. The bitter taste of humiliation mixed with the porridge as it slid down my throat. That kiss had destroyed my dignity. She fed me the entire bowl as if I were a marionette. She seemed delighted by my sudden obedience, a radiant smile gracing her face. That room was too stifling. It's not good for your health. She wiped the corners of my mouth, her tone as tender as if she were handling a priceless treasure. From now on, you'll stay in my room. It has a balcony and a proper bathroom. You'll have more freedom. She led me out of that glass cage and into her master bedroom. It was indeed much larger, decorated in warm, inviting tones. Outside the massive glass window was a small balcony, where sunlight spilled onto the carpet, warm and inviting. A faint flicker of hope rose in my chest. Perhaps she really just wanted me by her side. The moment she let go of my hand, I scrambled toward the balcony and slid the glass door open. Fresh air hit my face, but my heart plummeted into the abyss a second later. The balcony was encased in a thick, anti-theft steel mesh, each bar as wide as my wrist, sealing the space completely. Forget a human. Even a sparrow couldn't bend its way out. Refusing to give up, I dashed into the bathroom. Even the tiny ventilation window there had been welded shut with steel bars. My phone had been confiscated long ago. This bedroom, which looked so cozy on the surface, had become a more sophisticated prison. Her freedom was nothing but a larger cage. Do you like it? Madelyn embraced me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. My body went rigid. I said nothing. The following day, she had a small camera installed in the bedroom, positioned directly facing the oversized bed. This way, when I'm at work, I can see you whenever I want, she explained with a chilling blend of innocence and cruelty. I'll talk to you through the speaker, so you won't feel bored. From that day on, my life in captivity entered a new phase. At first, I treated the camera as if it didn't exist. When she spoke to me, I simply turned my back and stayed silent. But a prolonged silence is enough to drive a sane man mad. The room was terrifyingly quiet. Over time, I began to uncontrollably anticipate the sound of her voice. It became my only bridge to the outside world. She would chat with me throughout her workday, recounting stories from our childhood. Silas, do you remember? You used to tie my hair to the chair. Her voice would crackle through the camera, sounding almost playful. I ignored her. I thought back then, were you doing it on purpose? Just so that when I stood up and my hair pulled, I'd have no choice but to turn around and look at you in embarrassment. Her voice was dreamy, yet decisive. You just wanted to make sure that in my eyes, it was only you, right? My heart jolted. What had clearly been a childish prank was being twisted by her words into a domineering confession. And snatching my milk bottle, it was because you wanted to share something with me, wasn't it? It had your scent and mine mixed together. These distorted, pathological interpretations were like needles pricking at my brain. I actually began to question myself. Was I really just being a brat back then? Every evening, she returned home on time. After her shower, smelling of milk and soap, she would crawl under the covers and cling to me from behind like an octopus, as if terrified I would vanish the moment I fell asleep. For the first few days, I was a statue, staying awake all night. Her touch and her breath felt like branding irons searing my skin. But gradually, I grew accustomed to it. I got used to the warmth of her embrace and the faint scent at the tip of my nose. Wrapped in that suffocating hold, I actually began to sleep better and better. A month passed. I started to feel that, aside from her psychopathic need for control, Madelyn didn't seem quite so terrifying. She remembered that I hated cilantro. She bought me the latest gaming consoles, and she would gently pat my back whenever I had a nightmare. That evening, she returned home from work with a strange expression. Gone was her usual air of professional efficiency. Instead, she looked incredibly solemn. She didn't change her clothes, nor did she join me for dinner. She simply stood at the doorway, watching me in silence for a long time before calling in her bodyguards. Two hulking men entered, their faces devoid of emotion. As they approached me, my heart constricted with a sense of impending doom. "What do you think you're doing?" Before I could even finish the sentence, they seized my arms. With staggering strength, they pinned me down onto the bed, one on each side. Then they produced thick silk cords and practiced ease, binding my wrists and ankles tightly, fixing me into an X shape. Terror crashed over me like a freezing tide, drowning my senses. "Madelyn, you're insane. Let me go." She slowly walked to the edge of the bed, carrying a bowl of pitch-black liquid. Her face was a mask of unwavering determination and fanatical obsession. Her voice was as soft as a whisper. "Silas, drink this, and we will be together forever. Get away from me." I thrashed with everything I had, the cords biting painfully into my wrists, but a large portion of the liquid was forced down my throat. Almost instantly, a strange, searing heat surged from deep within my core, rapidly spreading to every limb. My consciousness began to blur, my rationality swallowed whole by a primal, irresistible force. My final memory of that night was Madelyn waving her hand to dismiss the bodyguards, her silhouette descending over me as she leaned in close. That night felt as long as an endless, feverish dream. When I woke up the next day, the resentment I had harbored for weeks had vanished, replaced by a strange, heavy exhaustion. I opened my eyes to find Madelyn sleeping soundly beside me, her face flushed with a healthy glow. The room was disturbingly quiet. A complex scent hung in the air, a silent, lingering reminder of everything that had transpired during the night. Terror hit me like a tsunami. I had crossed the ultimate line with the female lead of this world. Can I even survive this now? At that moment, her eyelashes fluttered. She woke up and met my horrified gaze. She didn't look guilty in the slightest. Instead, she gave me a satisfied smile and leaned down to plant a kiss on my lips. "You're awake," she said, sitting up. She began to explain the madness of the previous night. It turned out that ever since I called off the engagement, her parents hadn't stopped trying to find a new suitor for her. Just yesterday, they had issued an ultimatum. They had handpicked a young heir from another powerful family and were forcing her to meet him. She had gotten into a massive argument with her parents and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the end, she decided to use this extreme method to crush her parents' hopes once and for all. The deed was done. Hearing that she had her own pressures and had been pushed to such a breaking point, a soft spot in the deepest corner of my heart was stirred. A flicker of compassion emerged. I looked at her, my mind a tangled mess. It was true. What had happened happened. She was my woman now. To hell with the cursed script and the deadly ending. I'd cross that bridge when I got to it, come what may. At worst, I'd die. And if I had to go, taking the world's female lead down with me didn't seem like a losing bargain. As the saying goes, to die beneath a peony flower is to be a romantic ghost. From that night on, I simply gave up the struggle. If resisting only led to humiliation, then perhaps following along would lead to peace. If you can't beat him, join him. I decided to change my lifestyle and began playing the role of a devoted husband. I wanted to see exactly what she would do to me if I actually cooperated. They say the way to a woman's heart is through her stomach, so I decided to start with cooking. I searched for a mountain of recipes online and stormed into the kitchen with misplaced confidence. The result, however, was a horror show. The steak was charred into a lump of coal, the sautéed broccoli was a withered yellow, and the only bowl of tomato egg soup was so salty it could make a grown man weep. I stared at the dark cuisine on the table, unable to even look at it myself. Just as I was about to dispose of the evidence, Madelyn returned. She saw me wearing an apron, standing by the table with a guilty conscience, and then she saw the monstrous dishes. First, she stood there in a daze. Then, a light ignited in her eyes that I had never seen before. Did you make this?" Her voice trembled. Stiffly, I nodded. I expected her to mock me or tell the maid to throw it out immediately. She didn't. She sat down carefully, picked up her chopsticks, and grabbed a piece of the black coal, putting it into her mouth without a second's hesitation. I watched her tensely, waiting for her to spit it out. But she just chewed firmly, swallowed, and looked up. Her eyes were shimmering as she looked at me, her face glowing with irrepressible joy. "It's delicious." She took a sip of that brine-like soup. She didn't even flinch. Instead, her smile widened. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten in my life." In that moment, a part of my heart felt a heavy impact. I knew she was lying. This stuff was fundamentally inedible, but the pure, bottomless happiness on her face couldn't be faked. Under her encouragement, my cooking skills actually improved by leaps and bounds. And Madelyn, she transformed from a frigid CEO into a young girl who came home on time every day, her eyes full of anticipation to be fed by me. She would act like a little girl, resting her chin on her hands as she watched me bustle about, then finishing every single scrap of food on the table. Seeing her look so satisfied, the resentment of being a prisoner that had festered in my heart somehow began to dissolve. She saw the change in me, too. One day, she had the camera in the bedroom removed. A few days later, she stopped locking me in the room, allowing me to move freely throughout the entire villa. Then, one morning a month later, before heading to work, she placed a key in my palm. "If you want to go out for a walk, go ahead. Just remember to come home early for dinner." I gripped that cold metal key, my heart a mess of conflicting emotions. I was allowed to go outside. At first, I only went to the nearby supermarket to buy groceries. When I returned that day, Madelyn hugged me, as she usually did. Her nose brushed against my neck as she inhaled my scent, but she suddenly froze. She looked up, and the smile in her eyes turned to ice. "This perfume isn't mine," she said softly, though the words vibrated with danger. "Which woman did it come from?" My heart hammered against my ribs as I hurriedly explained that the cashier of the supermarket had stood too close and the scent must have rubbed off on me by accident. She said nothing, only stared at me with a possessive intensity that felt almost physical. That night, the atmosphere in the room became scorching and treacherous. She used her actions to remind me that my body was only permitted to carry her scent. The storm of that night was fueled by both fury and obsession. When I woke the next morning, my entire body felt as if it had been branded with her personal seal, a reminder of a punishment I couldn't resist. I woke up with an aching back and sore knees, feeling as if I had been taken apart and put back together. Lying face down on the bed, I gritted my teeth, cursing her for being such a jealous little brat. But after a few moments of grumbling, my lips uncontrollably curled into a smile. The feeling of being cared for to the point of exhaustion, of being someone's entire world, was actually quite addictive. Today, Madelyn unusually didn't go to the office. I just set lunch on the table when she came downstairs. She was wearing a cream-white maxi dress with light makeup, looking gentle and radiant. "Not working today?" I asked, a bit surprised. She walked over to me, naturally smoothing out my collar. A mysterious smile played on her lips. "There's something more important today. I'm taking you to a wedding." "A wedding? Whose?" "You'll see when we get there. It's someone you definitely won't expect." I muttered to myself, wondering who I could possibly know in this city anymore. The wedding was held on the lawn of a top-tier riverside hotel, draped in white roses, extravagant and romantic. I followed Madelyn into the venue, and my eyes immediately landed on a massive wedding portrait at the entrance. In the photo, the bride and groom were beaming with happiness. When I recognized their faces, I froze as if struck by lightning. The groom was Quincy, the original male lead of this world. The bride was Tessa, the freshman girl who had confessed to me and whom I had used as a shield. My head spun. What is going on? The original male lead and the cannon fodder, freshmen, are getting married? I instinctively looked at Madelyn beside me. She was watching my expression with great amusement. "Now you know how I figured out you were lying back then," she whispered, her tone laced with a hint of smug satisfaction. I caught the two of them walking hand in hand downtown. She reached out and hooked her arm through mine, a clear gesture of reclaiming her territory. Your pathetic little excuse about running away for love crumbled right then and there. I gave a dry, awkward laugh, not daring to argue. "Speaking of which, they actually invited you," she added. I was stunned. "Me? How come I never heard anything about it?" Madelyn pulled my phone out of her purse and dangled it playfully in front of me. Her expression was a mix of domineering authority and mischievous charm. "Because your phone has been with me this whole time. I saw the invitation and took the liberty of RSVPing for you." She tilted her head. "I originally planned to come alone, but then I thought it would be much more interesting to have you witness this with your own eyes. I looked at her, momentarily speechless. The sensation of having my fate held so firmly in someone else's hands was suffocating. Yet through her words, it carried a sickeningly sweet undertone. My gaze drifted back to the newlyweds in the distance, then back to Madelyn clinging to my arm. It finally hit me. The plot of this world had completely veered off the tracks, all because of that one fall down the stairs. The destined leads were marrying other people, and I, the villain meant to die, was entangled with the original heroine. A wild thought struck me. Maybe Quincy and Tessa are the new protagonists of this world now. Perhaps the main character aura had transferred to them. If that were the case, didn't that mean I was finally safe? If Madelyn and I stayed together, we wouldn't trigger any more deadly flags. This realization finally allowed my heart to settle. A sense of relief I'd never felt before washed over me. As if reading my mind, Madelyn leaned into my ear to tease me. How does it feel? That freshman girl who almost fell into your mouth is now someone else's bride, and you're the one who pushed her there. Doesn't it feel like you just gave yourself a green hat? Hearing her joke about me, cuckolding myself, like that caused the last bit of tension in my chest to vanish. I decided to play along, leaning into her ear and speaking in a tone of exaggerated regret. Man, what a massive loss. If I'd known, I should have had a taste first before pushing her away. It wouldn't have been too late. The moment the words left my mouth, I took 2 hits to the chest. Not too hard, but not exactly light either. Madelyn glared at me with a faux furious pout, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson. She balled up her tiny fist and gave me another thump. You wouldn't dare. In this life, you belong only to me. You want to fool around? Dream on. Otherwise, I'll break your legs. Those punches felt like nothing. She was less like a threat and more like a kitten acting spoiled. The wedding of Quincy and Tessa served as a formal proclamation, a declaration that the original world had collapsed and been restructured in a way I could never have anticipated. Not long after, Madelyn and I held our own wedding. That day, standing at the altar, I watched Madelyn's father escort her toward me, step by step. She wore a wedding dress so beautiful it made my heart skip a beat. In that moment, every memory from our childhood to adulthood flashed through my mind. Snatching her milk, yanking her pigtails, being chased by her across the playground. And finally, it all came to rest on those obsessive yet deeply affectionate eyes of hers from when she had me locked away. I couldn't help but think, this derailed plot was actually pretty damn good. At the reception, our parents sat together at the same table. The atmosphere was incredibly harmonious. Madelyn's father raised his glass, grinning like a sly fox as he patted my father on the shoulder. Old man, your family is certainly generous, he teased. First, you give us a dowry for the engagement, then you pay a massive compensation when the engagement is canceled. After such a long detour, this brat still ended up as my son-in-law. Weren't you just looking for an excuse to give us spending money? My father's face immediately soured as he pointed at me. Isn't it all because of this rascal? I told him not to cancel it, but he wouldn't listen. He even ran away from home and ordered me to take good care of your family while he was gone. If it isn't begging to give you money, I don't know what is. The entire table erupted in laughter. My mother quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Oh, come on. Why bring that up on such a happy day? They're just kids. A little bickering is normal. Now that we're one family, even if the money moves back and forth, it's all staying in the same pot anyway. I looked at them, a wave of warmth filling my chest. Married life turned out to be far different from what I had expected. I thought I'd at least have to learn how to manage the family business. To my surprise, Madelyn displayed an astounding talent for corporate warfare. She decisively merged our 2 companies, splitting the shares 50-50 between us, and then promptly kicked me back home. According to her, you staying at home to raise the children is your greatest possible contribution to the conglomerate. And so, I contentedly settled into my role as a full-time father. The female lead works, male lead stays home dynamic was implemented to the fullest. In the blink of an eye, our daughter, Luna, turned 2 years old. On a beautiful, sunny afternoon, I sat on the carpet cradling Luna. She was clutching a piece of buttercream cake, her face smeared with frosting. I dabbed a bit of cream with my finger and brought it to her lips. Looking at her rosy, chubby face, I began to pass down my life experience in a deep, solemn tone. Luna, listen to Daddy. Later on at school, if there's ever a boy who bullies you every single day, if he picks on you, teases you, and makes you chase him, I paused, my voice dropping to a heavy, serious tone. You must remember, stay far, far away from that boy. That kind of person is a villain. He'll find a way to trick you, bring you home, and lock you up. In the end, he'll gobble you up until there's nothing left but bone. Luna looked up at me from my lap. With a look of half-understanding, she nodded solemnly. Okay, Luna knows now. Aside from Daddy, Grandpa, and Grandpa, all boys are bad guys. Luna will stay away from them. She spoke in a tiny, high-pitched voice, patting my chest with her sticky, buttercream-covered hand to show her resolve. Mommy won't let me have cake, but Daddy does. Luna likes Daddy best. I rubbed her head, feeling smug. That's my girl. You're the best, Luna. I wonder who it was that used those exact same lines to trick me into coming home, so they could lock me up? Madelyn, who had been busy on her laptop nearby, looked up. She gave me a look that was equal parts annoyed and amused. I immediately protested. Hey, I wasn't some snot-nosed brat back then. I was a handsome, dashing young man, and I definitely wasn't a bad guy. Luna immediately took my side, shielding me with her tiny body. Mommy, don't say that to Daddy. Daddy isn't a bad guy. Daddy gives me buttercream cake. Madelyn couldn't help but burst out laughing at the two of us. You little traitor. Go on then, eat. When you grow up to be as round as a ball, your daddy won't want you anymore. I quickly pulled my daughter into a tighter hug. Don't listen to her, Luna. You go ahead and eat. Even if you turn into a little balloon, Daddy will still love you. Reassured by my promise, the little girl lowered her head with a satisfied hum and went back to battling the piece of cake in her hands.